Every autumn, millions of people burn branches, haul yard waste to the curb, and pay to have it taken away. Then they go to the garden store and buy fertilizer. Then they set up irrigation systems. Then they wonder why their soil is getting worse every year. Meanwhile, in the Austrian Alps, one farmer buried wood instead of burning it and grew lemons in the snow. Just wood buried in the ground and 20 years of harvests that his neighbors said were impossible. His name is Sepp Holzer, and the government fined him for it. Not once, dozens of times. Thousands of euros in penalties for building mounds, digging ponds, burying logs on his own land. Officials called it reckless. Agricultural inspectors showed up with clipboards and violation notices. The agricultural board threatened to take his farm. His response was simple. He kept building, and his yields were 10 times higher than any neighbor following the rules. Lemons in the Alps, kiwis growing next to spruce trees, grapes ripening on slopes where neighbors could barely grow grass, all of it without a single bag of fertilizer or a meter of irrigation hose. The method he used is called hugelkultur. It is over 1,000 years old. It was practiced across Europe for centuries, and it disappeared almost completely in the 20th century, not because it stopped working, but because it could not be sold. You cannot put buried wood in a bag. You cannot patent decay. You cannot charge someone every season for logs they buried last year. So the method that feeds soil for 20 years without any product got replaced by products you buy every season forever. This video explains how hugelkultur works, why it disappeared, and why the farmer who kept doing it was the most fined man in Austria, and also the most productive. Here is what they did not want you to build. Most gardeners today are on a treadmill they did not choose to get on. Every spring, fertilizer. Every summer, irrigation. Every autumn, hauling away the organic material that would have fed the soil if it had been left there. Then next spring, fertilizer again, more irrigation, more hauling. The soil does not improve. The bills do not stop. And nobody questions it because this is just how gardening works now. Except it is not how gardening worked for most of human history. For centuries, farmers in Central Europe built mounds from fallen logs, branches, and yard waste. They layered organic material into raised beds that held water like a sponge and released nutrients for decades. No store, no delivery, no annual purchase, just wood that was going to rot anyway, put into the ground where the rot would do something useful. That practice had a name: hugelkultur, hill culture in German. And it produced results that modern inputs have never matched on the same long-term timeline. Today, the average American gardener spends hundreds of dollars per year on fertilizer and water for a plot that gets worse every decade. The soil loses organic matter. The biological life decreases. The inputs required go up. The yields go down. And the solution offered by every garden center, every agricultural extension, every sponsored gardening channel is always the same: buy more product. The treadmill is not an accident. It is a business model. And the alternative, the one that requires a one-time investment of physical labor and produces 20 years of free fertility, is the one that got a farmer fined dozens of times by his own government for daring to use it. The water bills, the fertilizer invoices, the irrigation equipment, none of it was necessary. The wood was free. The labor was one afternoon. The results lasted 2 decades. Most people have never heard of hugelkultur. That is not a coincidence. The method is as simple as it sounds and as old as the forests it comes from. You dig a trench or build directly on top of the ground. You lay the biggest, oldest, most rotted logs you can find as the base. Oak and maple are best, hardwoods that break down slowly and feed the soil for years. You never use cedar, walnut, or treated wood. Those release compounds that harm roots and stall the biological process. You stack the logs tightly, every gap filled with smaller branches and twigs. This is not a loose pile. Every air pocket is a future sinkhole as the wood compresses. Then you add a layer of nitrogen-rich green material, grass clippings, fresh manure, kitchen scraps. This step matters more than most people realize. Rotting wood is hungry for nitrogen in its early stages. Without this layer, the decomposing wood steals nitrogen from the soil around it and from your plants. The symptom is yellow leaves, and stunted growth in the first season. The fix is simple, but it has to happen at build time. Cap everything with at least a foot of topsoil and mulch. Water it in well during the first year while the wood absorbs the initial moisture charge. After that, the mound handles itself. Year 1, the wood begins decomposing and absorbing water. Year 2, moisture levels inside the mound stabilize and the biological activity accelerates. By year 3, the soil inside is measurably richer than the ground around it. By year 5, most practitioners stop supplemental irrigation entirely. By year 20, the mound has fed crops continuously without a single bag of fertilizer. Sepp Holzer built mounds like this across steep alpine terraces, where the conventional agricultural wisdom said nothing useful could grow. Citrus on slopes, kiwis next to spruce, grapes at altitudes that no viticulture textbook considered viable. His farm produced 10 times the food of neighboring properties following approved methods. The government fined him for the ponds he dug, the terraces he built, the mounds he made. In 1989, the Agricultural Board threatened to seize his farm entirely. His response was to invite the officials to look at what was growing. Lemons in the Alps in January. After that, the fines kept coming, but so did the harvests. The science behind hugelkultur is not complicated. It is physics and biology doing exactly what they have always done, just in a configuration that most modern gardens have eliminated. Wood is a sponge, not a metaphor, a physical sponge with millions of tiny pores and tunnels built from lignin cell walls. When wood begins to decay, those pathways open wider. Water floods every chamber. Laboratory tests on heavily decomposed pine logs show absorption rates of over 500% of dry weight. Oak doubles or triples its mass with moisture. That water does not evaporate quickly. It stays inside the wood structure and releases slowly to plant roots above. Field measurements inside hugelkultur mounds during dry summer months show 40 to 60% soil moisture, while neighboring flat beds crack and wilt. The buried logs act as a hidden reservoir recharged by every rain and released continuously through dry periods. In drought years that emptied neighboring wells, Holzer's terraces stayed moist. A retired schoolteacher in the Pacific Northwest built her first mound from storm-felled maple logs. By the second spring, she had put her hose away. It stayed coiled for the rest of the season. Her water bill dropped so sharply that the utility sent a notice asking if her meter was broken. The decomposition process is exothermic. Microbes and fungi breaking down lignin and cellulose release heat. In alpine winters, the ground above a buried log sits several degrees warmer than the surrounding air and measurably warmer than flat fields nearby. Seeds germinate earlier. Late frosts that kill plants on bare ground pass over these mounds. Tomatoes and squash ripen weeks after neighboring gardens have shut down for the year. Holzer grew citrus in the Alps not through greenhouse technology or special varieties. He grew it because his mounds created microclimates where Mediterranean conditions existed inside an alpine environment. As the logs break down, they release nitrogen, phosphorus, and calcium at a slow, continuous rate matched to the pace of plant growth. No boom and bust, no flush of fertility followed by collapse. Just a steady infusion that field trials confirm can continue for 20 years or more. The biological engine inside the mound accelerates this process. Fungi weave through log fibers, forming networks that move minerals from deep in the mound to surface roots. Bacteria break complex compounds into plant-available nutrients. Earthworms tunnel through the softening wood, mixing it with soil and leaving castings richer than any bagged amendment. Even after a decade, soil from the core of a well-built mound tests higher for nitrogen and phosphorus than the surrounding ground. The nutrients are not washed away by rain. They are locked inside the wood structure, released only as the biological process continues. This is not a quick fix. It is a 20-year investment that pays back more every year without requiring anything additional. Flat fields became the standard after 1920 for one reason: machines. Tractors and harvesters required uniform surfaces. No bumps, no mounds, nothing that could slow a steel wheel or jam a plow. The old practice of building mounds from buried wood did not fail. It did not fit. A tractor covers a flat acre in minutes. A hugelkultur terrace cannot be mechanized the same way. Fields were scraped level, brush was burned, and the landscape was reworked to suit the needs of machines rather than the needs of soil. The efficiency argument took over. More ground covered, fewer obstacles, higher output per hour. The slow, patient fertility of buried wood was replaced by the measurable, purchasable fertility of synthetic fertilizer. You could put a number on a bag of nitrogen. You could not put a number on 20 years of decomposing oak. What the efficiency argument never calculated was the long-term cost of what was lost. Flat, mechanized fields are dependent fields. They need fertilizer every season because they have no internal fertility cycle. They need irrigation because they have no internal water reservoir. They need pesticides because monoculture at scale creates vulnerability that diverse raised beds do not have. Every dependency is a purchase. Every purchase is a market. Every market has beneficiaries. The hugelkultur mound eliminated most of those dependencies in a single construction event. That made it incompatible with an agricultural economy built on recurring sales. This is not a conspiracy. No one sat in a room and decided to eliminate buried wood gardens. The economics simply did not support them. Research funding went to products. Extension advice went to purchasable inputs. Agricultural education went to scalable, mechanizable methods. And the method that required one afternoon of labor and returned 20 years of free fertility slowly disappeared from the conversation because no one with institutional money had any reason to keep it in the conversation. Sepp Holzer kept it in the conversation by refusing to stop. The government fined him for it. By the end of the decade, he was the most fined farmer in Austria. He was also the most productive. The fertilizer industry loses when you build a hugelkultur mound, not dramatically, not all at once, but permanently. A mound built from free logs produces 20 years of fertility without a single bag of nitrogen, phosphorus, or potassium purchased from anyone. Multiply that across a garden, multiply it across a neighborhood, multiply it across a country. The market for synthetic soil amendments disappears in direct proportion to the number of people who build mounds instead of buying bags. The irrigation industry loses too. A well-built hugelkultur bed eliminates supplemental irrigation for most of its productive life. Water bills drop. Irrigation equipment is not purchased. The infrastructure of pumps, timers, drip lines, and spray heads serves no purpose in a garden that waters itself from below. The garden amendment market. The compost bags, the soil conditioners, the pH adjusters, the mycorrhizal inoculants, loses access to the customers whose soil improves every year on its own. None of these industries conspired to suppress hugelkultur. They did not need to. The method was simply never given the institutional support that products receive. No university extension office with fertilizer company funding recommends buried wood as a primary fertility strategy. No garden center with margin targets on synthetic amendments leads with a technique that eliminates the need for synthetic amendments. The information gap is maintained by economic incentive, not by active suppression. The result is identical either way. Most people have never heard of this method. Most people continue buying what they do not need to buy. The farmer who proved this at scale was fined by his government dozens of times. His response was to write a book about it. His yields kept speaking louder than any fine. Droughts are getting worse. Fertilizer prices are climbing. Water restrictions are expanding. Topsoil loss is accelerating. The agricultural model that replaced hugelkultur and methods like it is producing these outcomes systematically and predictably. The Gulf of Mexico dead zone is the size of New Jersey, caused by fertilizer runoff from fields that would not need that fertilizer if they had internal fertility cycles. Half of Iowa's topsoil is gone. The UN says 90% of Earth's topsoil will be at risk by 2050. Every branch burned in autumn is water that will not be in the soil next July. Every log hauled to the curb is 20 years of fertility sent to a landfill. Every bag of synthetic fertilizer purchased is a dependency deepened and a soil biology weakened. The alternative has been available the entire time. It does not require a purchase. It does not require expertise. It requires wood, labor, one afternoon, and the willingness to leave the wood in the ground instead of burning it. Sepp Holzer grew lemons in the Alps using this method. He was fined for it. His neighbors came to stare at the fruit on the trees. The inspectors came back with cameras instead of clipboards. The evidence was impossible to ignore. The climate crisis is not going to be solved by better synthetic fertilizers. It is not going to be solved by more efficient irrigation systems. It is going to require methods that build soil instead of depleting it, that retain water instead of requiring it from external sources, that create fertility instead of consuming it. Agriculture does all three. It has done all three for 1,000 years. And most people are burning the raw material for it every autumn. You do not need to change the agricultural system to use this method. You need a shovel, some logs, and one afternoon. The wood that is going to burn in your neighbor's fire pit this weekend would feed a garden bed for 20 years. The branches being hauled to the curb on your street right now are a free water reservoir for your driest summer months. The organic material you are paying to have removed is the fertility your soil is missing. Build one mound. Start with whatever you have. Old logs from a downed tree, storm debris, branches from a pruning. Stack them, fill the gaps, add green material, cap with soil, water it in once, and leave it. Come back in 3 years and tell me what happened. Leave it in the comments. Because the most useful agricultural information has always traveled that way, person to person, observation to observation, garden to garden. If that is the kind of content you want more of, subscribe. There are more methods like this one. Methods that cost nothing. Methods that work for decades. Methods that nobody is selling, which is exactly why you haven't heard of them.